All right, all yours, you can go ahead.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown of, of Executive Affairs for the Board of Education. And today we are here to discuss a charter school BRIC charter in particular. And my colleague, Dr. Ebony Bullock, Chief of Accountability and Shared Accountability, is here to facilitate. I'm going to hand it over to you, Dr. Bullock. Two of our board members are here, two of my colleagues, Dr. Larry Scott, three. Larry Scott, who is Vice President of Student Achievement, Jim McCousey, board member, as well as our President, Sharon B. Cotman. Good afternoon, everyone. It goes over to you, Dr. Bullock.
Good afternoon.
Good evening, everyone. Before us today is the charter revision from BRIC Academy Charter School. I will read what we were sent. It says, "Dear Dr. Williams, the first notice of this revision in its capacity as a charter authorizer has received the following charter revision request. BRIC Buffalo Academy Charter School is located at 30 Rich Street, Buffalo, New York, 14211 in Buffalo City School District, and is chartered to serve 162 students in grade K1 for the 23-24 school year and growing to serve 486 students in grades K5 for the 27-28 school year. The final year of the current charter term. The school requests an enrollment decrease to serve 56 students in grades K1 for the 23-24 school year and growing to serve 340 students in grades K5 for the 27-28 school year. So our job today is to hold a public hearing around BRIC's request to decrease their enrollment. And again, they want to move from serving 162 students for the current school year to 56 students in grades K to 1, and ultimately decreasing from 486 students K5 by the 27-28 school year to 340 students K through 5 for the 27 through 28 school year. So I also want my esteemed board to know that BRIC has responded to 2 email requests where they have stated that they would not be appearing physically or virtually for this public hearing. However, since it is our obligation to hold the hearing and to receive public comments, questions, and concerns, we will go ahead and move to that time period where we will receive public questions, comments, concerns, including from our esteemed board members. Mr. Admir does have the public chat open should there be questions, comments, or concerns coming from the viewing public. So, Madam Vice President, I turn the floor back over to you. Right now, there are no questions in the public chat. So I turn the floor back over to you should there be any questions, comments, or concerns from the board members.
Thank you, Dr. Bullock, for that update. I don't see any hands. Do any of my colleagues have questions or comments about, okay, I see President Cotman's hand and Larry Scott's hand. I don't know who went first.
I'll defer to Mr. Scott since he's chair of the charter subcommittee.
Okay. Board Member Scott?
Thank you, VP, Dr. Evans-Brown. Dr. Bullock, did BRIC Charter indicate the reason why they weren't going to participate virtually or in person in this hearing?
They did not specifically. What they specifically said in their response was that their application for the revision speaks for itself, and they had no other information that they wish to provide. We believe that they are leaning on their interpretation of charter school law that states that charters in these public hearings don't have to appear before our board. We could do a public hearing in other spaces, but they don't necessarily have to appear before our board and take questions from our boards only, specifically only. But they have in writing responded that their application for revision speaks for itself, and that is all that they have for us.
So I think you answered my second question. They don't have an obligation then to appear publicly with us.
Not according to charter law, no.
So, but are they obligated to, though, hold a public hearing in a different matter? Well, not with the Board of Education.
No.
But we as a board, though, are obligated to hold this hearing.
Yes, to host it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, President Cotman, followed by Jim Kusi.
So I need you to recap what you said initially. The initial application was for 162 children, and when was that supposed to start? And how many children were enrolled? And what are they proposing? I need that to be reiterated because if you can't get 162, they're saying 4 years from now, they will have how many more? 200 more children approximately?
Sure, the initial charter, sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The initial charter application requested 162 students, K through first grade, for this current school year, 2023 through 24, and growing to serve 486 students in grades K through 5 for the 27-28 school year, which will be the final year of their current charter term. And so they're requesting a decrease for this school year from 162 to 56. So they want to serve 56 students in grades K through 1 for this school year, and growing to serve 340 students instead of the 486 in grades K to 5 for their final term year, which is 27-28.
Okay. All right. So I guess I understand why they don't want to come and necessarily answer any questions, but if from their initial presentation to the board is that they said that they were most sought after, that they had significant support from the community, and now we're talking about coming down. Do you know how many students were enrolled in their first year?
So this is their first year, and again, they're asking for a decrease from 162 to 56. So my best guess, or I would assume, that they're serving 56 students currently. But we don't know because they have not, again, they only, and they didn't even submit the revision request to us. The revision request came from SUNY Charter Institute. So they have not given us any information whatsoever.
Okay. So how do we find out this information? Do we have to go to the charter school office in Albany to ask them for this information? Because I think it's important that we know how many children. I mean, are they planning just to hold steady for 56 students? I don't understand what's going on here. Do you have 56 students or do you not? Because it just seems like to me, if you've opened up enrollment, that if you had 56 students, you would be expecting to have more. So I'm confused as to what's going on here. And I'm not too unsure that this is not a statement from that we are oversaturated with charter schools. I'm going to go on record to say that. Thank you.
President Cotman, what we can do is we can request that information from SUNY Charter to see what the school's enrollment is now. We can also send BRIC a FOIL request, a request that they ask, answer that question, how many students do they currently have enrolled?
Mhm.
Okay, so since you opened up FOIL requests, I want to, if I remember by law, we have to have the meeting for at least 15 minutes to allow them to get here if they were running late or something like that. So it's possible.
Yes.
We'll make sure that that is met. I guess where I'm going with this is I'm confused. I'm really confused. And I need to know what's going on. When we request FOIL, can we also request the information about how many children were returned back to Buffalo Public Schools this year and things like that? How do you, what depth, to what degree can you get information from on the FOIL?
Chief Scarpone.
Hi, President Cotman. Hopefully you can hear me. For FOIL requests, it is for records access. So under FOIL, they do not have to answer any questions, but if there is a responsive document, that is something that could be provided. So that would be kind of a request that can be made.
Okay. However, with Buffalo, our FOIL request, because we are a true, we're a public school, and we are beholden to the state, we would have to provide that information if it was asked of us. Is not that true?
If we have records that are responsive to the request. If we do not have records that exist that would respond to the requested information, we do not have to create it or answer questions under FOIL.
All right. Thank you, Council Scarpine. Thank you.
I know that Jen Macusi has the floor, but prior to that, I just have one question, Dr. Bullock. The Buffalo Public Schools, what responsibility do we have with BRIC? Do we support, transportation and other amenities for that school?
Currently, I don't believe we're supporting them in that manner. If they have students with IEP, I do believe that there is some obligation from our district to provide support and help with students with disabilities if they have need. But I also, I don't believe that we support them in transportation because they are not because we don't authorize them. We don't really have any obligations to them. We do.
Okay.
We'll look into it. Chief Scarpine says we'll look into it.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. All right, Jen, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. So some of my questions have been kind of addressed, but I was wondering about transportation. I was also wondering about lunches, any food costs, and, our students with disabilities. So I'd really like to know that. I want to go on record stating that the divide that the community feels and sees is being played out in real time right here. When we have to open up the floor in order to have a meeting so that we can, be in partnership, and then to have a basic, we don't have to attitude. We are the Buffalo Public Schools. And for this type of, I'm perceiving it as like a negative thing, only because this is open for public comment, public questions. And if you feel that it's not necessary, yet you're in such high demand and high need, and yet you're coming to us looking to reduce your students, you've literally painted yourself a picture of questionable status. So I just need that publicly put out there, then people can say what they'd like about how I'm approaching this. But we all have to be here. We're obligated to be here. And if this is, you have to request this from us or make this public through BPS, the least you could have done is shown up. So I just needed to state that. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Macusi.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Madam
ma'am.
Chair.
Mhm.
On that point, I make something on that point.
Yes.
Okay. I need you to also note that this is not a Board of Regents sponsored school. This is a SUNY sponsored school. And the game is often played differently under the SUNY umbrella versus the Board of Regents. So I like that to be part of the record as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so it looks like, Larry Scott, did you have anything else? Board Member Scott?
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing, that we actually all approved a resolution last school year. It might have been the previous board, in opposition to this charter school being approved by SUNY. And we had legal counsel, I think, represent us in regards to how we felt SUNY did not live up to the requirements that are in the charter school statute. And unfortunately, we did not, the courts did not rule in our favor. But I just wanted to also make that public based on what happened last year.
And that's duly noted. That's a
Good
good point.
point, Larry. Good point, because that we did pass that.
Yes.
Madam Vice President, if it is your wish, can we check with Admir to see if there are any questions, comments, or concerns in the public chat?
Absolutely.
Admir, do you see any questions or comments, concerns in the public chat? Just giving him one.
Couple more seconds.
No. It appears that as of 4:19, that there are no comments, questions, or other concerns in the public chat.
Confirmed. There's no question, no more questions on this side either, Dr. Bullock, for the board.
Okay. Madam Vice President, it is 4:20. I recommend, Chief Secretary, I recommend that we keep this meeting open for at least 10 more minutes. That would round us out about 4:30. My staff and Dr. Cressy's, we were here at 4:45 to prepare for the meeting. And so we certainly by then would have been around and ready to support Brick's appearance for 45 minutes, but they, the meeting started at 4. They had until 4:30, unless you would like for us to hold the meeting open past 4:30.
Is that a question for?
I'm
The
sorry,
board?
might have been, yes. Do you think
No.
holding it to 4:30 is fine?
I think holding it to 4:30 is fine. That's giving folks an opportunity to chime in, defend, et cetera. So I think that's ample enough time.
Madam Vice President and my esteemed board members, just for clarity, I also want you to know that at approximately 3:45, Director Brad Behringer in the Office of Shared Accountability sent an email to BRIC so that they could appear virtually. And as of 4:20, have we had a response? We have not had a response to that email as a reminder and, giving them the information they would need to appear virtually.
So, with that said, I am going to excuse myself to prepare for the next meeting. If I will keep this channel open in the event I hear, but I'm going to come off of camera at this point, okay? Because I do have some things to do for our evening meeting. All right? Thank you.
Okay, similarly, I'm gonna go off the camera so I can drive home. See you shortly.
Bye now.
I am available
So,
though.
Ebony? Oh, you are?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Dr. Bullock.
Yes.
Dr. Bullock,
Yes.
have we ever had a situation like this before?
No.
And you, as far back as you can remember?
As far back as I can remember, probably the last 10 years, I don't know of any charter school public hearing that we've had where the charter school did not show up.
Okay, thank you.
Or nor provide,
Thank you.
nor provide information.
What type of information did you ask for?
So we asked for enrollment, we asked for their financials, we asked for demographics of their student body as well as their staff. We also asked for
Well, we didn't request that for this meeting.
I'm sorry. That's what we typically ask for. For this meeting, we just really asked for a rationale.
Or a presentation or a handout explaining to the board why they chose to decrease the enrollment.
We asked for a presentation or handout explaining why they requested the enrollment decrease.
Oh, okay. All right, so we didn't have to follow the same guidelines or that we prefer that the others is followed. Okay, thank you for this, because this was not a renewal. This was just a reduction in enrollment. All right.
Enrollment.
So we just asked for a brief explanation. Will we notify SUNY of this situation, that we did have the hearing and that the board, we will notify SUNY that we had the hearing?
Yes, we will send them an email tomorrow to SUNY and the CSO that the school community did not show up physically or virtually, nor that they have members of their community show up physically or virtually. Director Behringer is also taking notes of the public comments offered by the board, and we will send that to SUNY and the CSO tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Admir, we're just going to do one last check. It's 4:27. Do we have any comments or questions in the public chat?
No.
No. Madam President, as of 4:27, we still have no questions or comments or concerns in the public chat.
Okay. So we will still hold on until 4:30.
Madam President, we have 4:30 officially. You can hear the chimes ringing in the background. So do I have, or can you close the meeting out?
Well, is Dr. Evans Brown online?
I think she disconnected so she could.
Yeah, I'm in the
Oh, she's
car,
in it? Okay.
Sharon, so if you don't
Would you-
mind closing it out, thank you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. So this concludes our mandatory meeting for Brick Buffalo Academy in regards to their request to reduce their enrollment from 162 to 56 students and from 486 to 340, respectfully, years 20, 24, 25, 20, 27, 28. And without further ado, I want to thank you, staff members, for your efforts that you put forward to make this happen. There's nothing else to say. Board Member Makuzi, Scott, no one else has anything to say. We're going to move forward because I have to do my homework. I have to do my my evaluation. Okay.
Me
So,
too.
all right. So we're going to go ahead and conclude. Thank you for your efforts. And thank you for everything you do. Have a great day.
Thank you. Madam President, Dr. Christie's asked me to say to you all, we'll see you at 5 for the work session.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
tell me?
Works.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Superintendent. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the Finance and Operations Committee meeting. And before I hand it over to Madam Superintendent, I just want to thank the team and reiterate that this is a heavy process that you have been through. The more I learn of it, the more overwhelmed I get with new information. So I just want to take a moment and thank everybody for your hard work and your diligence, because it's a lot to do in a chunk of time. And we know that this year specifically, we've got difficult decisions to make, which makes this process even more overwhelming. So I just wanted to pause and say thank you. I'm going to hand it over to you, Madam Superintendent, if you have anything to open with.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Hearing you say that this is a heavy lift is very accurate, very heavy. And, you know, I must say, though, that, you know, having Chief Burns at the helm has made the lift a little lighter, along with his team and this board. You know, this has been a process that really we've all been in, because almost every finance and ops meeting, I think, all year, we've really been focusing on this and modifying and listening, and then we go back to the table. You know, we've met with board members. The schools have been meeting with their SBMTs. I've even reached out in a meeting with students. We've heard from community members at board meetings, and, you know, staff have emailed all of us. So it really is.
John, I can't hear on my.
Board member Shuta, we could hear you. Okay. So, you know, it really is, it makes me think about a quote from Shirley Chisholm that says, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And we haven't had to have anyone bring a folding chair, because our table has had open seats all along. It's been a really inclusive, open process. We've been on the news about it. I mean, you know, we've been very, very open about it. So now we're getting down to where the rubber hits the road. And I'm going to turn things over to Chief Burns, and we will begin.
Well, thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Cindy. Not to sound repetitive, but this has been the most technically challenging, well-researched, analyzed, and discussed budget in recent memory. In my last conversation with the superintendent, we acknowledge this is the superintendent's budget, but it's based upon extensive and exhaustive community and stakeholder input. It's a very mindful plan of the children first, but also of the superintendent's staff, and it's dedicating $80 million to a successful transition for the district. Edmure, the first slide, please. Superintendent, as usual, we start out with your 3 stretch goals. Do you have any comments to add? Oh, we can't hear you. You should tell her something.
You know, that always happens when I'm on a roll. I was on a roll. You know, very consistent about the goals that the board has charged me with and that I have been working with my staff with and with our schools. And those goals, just to reiterate, are one, dealing with literacy and the measurement of how our children, our third graders who are economically disadvantaged, will score by the end of the year. The goal has been the goal, moving from 33% to 39%. We knew it was a stretch goal, but that's the goal, and that's what we've been working towards. Our math goal, as it will be measured on the iReady assessment tool, was moving our students from 13.3% to 15.9% by this June, by the end of the year. And with our graduation rate, what we hope to see is no decreases in the number of our children that are graduating. So this was really the impetus as we sat and talked about this budget. Everything that we kept or modified, it was with these three goals in mind. So these three goals really framed how this budget rolled out.
Thank you, Super. Andrea, next slide, please. So our objectives for tonight. First thing we're going to talk about, as usual, is the big picture. Well, we're all waiting for certain numbers and statistics later on. This is the most important slide. We have to understand the context of our situation that is driving our budget decisions. We really have to understand the big picture. We can't lose the forest for the trees, so, as they say. The next thing, I'll share the budget process. This is the level 3 presentation. We're going to inform on the school-based budget versus Munis FTE reconciliation and the superintendent add-backs that you've been waiting to hear about. We're going to identify and update the BPS's plan to mitigate layoffs. Then we're going to actually review the level 3 budget summary and detail. We're going to explain then, we hope at the end of tonight, that the board is in agreement with everything that's presented here, and then we move into level 4, which becomes the superintendent's proposed budget. I'm going to touch a little bit on our updated 4-year plan that is due immediately after the budget. Then we'll just summarize our comments and respond to any questions. Andrea, next slide, please. So the big picture, again, I think this is the most important slide for you to understand the decisions that you'll hear about later. We did not get into this situation in 1 year, and we can't fix it in 1 year. So the superintendents decided to take a 2-year approach. In addition, something she said at the last meeting we had, which might have been yesterday, I can't even remember now. We wanted to avoid any disruption to the good things that had been started. Athletics, security, and other things like that. So this is not a reactive plan. It's a proactive plan that we can proceed with cautiously and mindfully because of our financial strength. So, as always, we got to start out with the superintendent's keenly aware of the needs of our students, the schools, every department, and she's leading the charge to provide the necessary resources to meet the needs of all those areas in the 24-25 budget. We decided that Dr. Williams decided upon a 2-year plan to address the structural issues facing the district. This decision is based upon our loss of $90 million in our ARPA funding, our need to align total staff count to declining enrollments, the continuing challenges facing our students, and the financial strength of our district. The 2-year plan must reduce the total FTE count at the schools and central office to right-size staff and costs to the decrease in enrollments of 3,400 students over the last several years. The decrease in students reduces our foundation aid. Now that we're fully formula-based, we need to align our cost to that new reality. The superintendent's plan also has a dual and competing objectives of reducing our staff costs while at the same time mitigating layoffs. That is not an easy task. And that is, I think, the perfect example of how mindful this superintendent's plan is. At several points in the process, she could have took the easy approach, said lay off 330 people, or I'm not going to do anything and kick the can down the road. No, she took a surgical approach to lower the total FTE counts, which is addressing the long-term problem, while keeping front and center a desire to mitigate any layoffs. The 24-25 budget that we'll present here will begin to address the district's structural challenges as we develop a fiscally responsible update to our 4-year plan. Excuse me. The next bullet point is just to reiterate again. At the forefront of all this planning was to mitigate layoffs, protect the staff. So we implemented a hiring freeze, except for essential positions, cutting non-mandated vacancies at both central office and the schools, reducing coach and TOSA positions and moving them back to the classrooms. And again, that's after detailed analysis. We're not going to be filling projected non-mandatory retirements. We're taking a 2-year outlook on that, which I'll explain in a little bit. And I think most importantly, a commitment to use up to $80 million in district reserves in this 24-25 budget. Remember, big picture we're talking here. The success or failure of this plan will depend upon all of our collective discipline. The boards, principals, cabinet members, department heads, our discipline as an organization to not fill vacancies or retirements over the next 2 years and not request unbudgeted requests. Everything everybody needs, I feel, is in this budget. And as we talk through the details of it, I think you'll feel the same. And ending, because this is a resoundingly important point, she's dedicating $80 million of district reserves to implement this plan. We cannot responsibly use more than that. So it's an almost unheard of amount, but that's her commitment to providing the students with what they need and mitigating the layoffs. And next slide, please. So now we'll just go through how we've progressed through this and the next steps. Level 1, that was our worst case scenario. That was really turning your head to the problems and not doing anything. Just moving all the ARPESER expenditures and staff into the general fund, getting no additional revenues. That would have showed a $102 million deficit. The level 2 budget was after the governor's proposed budget came out and the formula-based school-based budget were processed. That resulted in the departments entered all of their non-staff requests. That resulted in a $79.8 million deficit. So tonight we're reporting on level 3, which shows an $83 million deficit. The revenues in level 3 show the final state budget. The superintendent has put together a specific list of additional school-based FTEs, which we'll discuss later, and added them back to the budget. Further meetings with departments were conducted to review non-staff budget submissions. Again, research, analysis, feedback, input. We've met with every cabinet member probably twice, every department member 2 or 3 times. What we're hoping for is sort of a consensus from the board that what's in here is a very, very solid plan under very difficult circumstances, and that we can proceed right into level 4 and basically use this as a foundation for getting an approved budget on May 15th. Ed, next slide, please. So we've seen this slide and many variations of it. This goes to the structural issues facing our district. School-based budget versus what was in the current year Munis FTE reconciliation. In the first column, it's a bunch of what they call object codes describing various job titles. Second column is the school-based budget equity-based. Remember we had a meeting on that. The school-based budget formulas are equity-based. They factor in enrollments, high needs, and every other factor that goes into what the kids need at those schools. The next column is what was in the current year budget. The yellow column, those are the reductions in each and every area, or another way to say it, the overstaffing in each of those areas. And if this was left up to an accountant or a ruthless individual, we would have simply cut 331 positions. In the green and final column are vacancies and retirements. Again, this was a mindful plan from the start, and we were going to cut the vacancies and the retirements, hopefully up to the level of the necessary reductions. They didn't quite meet that target, and you'll see how we pivoted based on that. If you go to the bottom line, these are the totals net of special ed or mandated positions. The school-based budget equity formula saying 3,717. We currently have 4,040 at the schools. That would have been a reduction to get in line with the equity-based formulas, would have been a reduction of 323. But we only had 187 vacancies. So what's happened? We cut the 323 during the level 2 budget to balance to the school-based budget. But we only had 187 vacancies. So that would have left 136 layoffs, let's call them that. However, the superintendent added back or saved 110 of those otherwise positions that would have been cut. And we'll go through the list of those add backs. So again, a very mindful budget in a situation where right sizing needs to occur. And Mayor, next slide, please. So, one of the points that I know everyone was waiting for, the superintendent equity add backs. In the first column, those are some of either the areas that got the most questioning and response, but then there's an other teacher subject area number at the bottom of that list. So I want to go through this real quick. The superintendent, after analysis of the school-based budget books, meetings with every board member, meetings with community groups, and the children that she went through this week, she's added back 110 FTEs from the school-based budget books. The total cost of those add backs is $8.9 million. It's about $12.3 million with benefits. It's important to note that these add backs, they'll be allocated to the schools at the discretion of the superintendent, and no formulas apply. They're true equity. Through her experience and knowledge of what's going on at the schools, she'll decide where these additional FTEs will be added back. The second, and I think most important point here, this is all great news. But I know often people misinterpret or nitpick, so I want to make this point clear. These add backs do not provide the schools with the same FTE counts as in the current year. Why? Because we're cutting vacancies and retirements due to the decline in enrollments. However, the live bodies, 11 APs, 22 aides, 44 social workers, guidance counselors, psychologists, attendance teachers, 8 music teachers, 1.5 being added back at School 84, and 24 other teachers will be added back, and they are live bodies. The vacancies and retirements that were in the school-based budget and that the principals did not pick, those are cut. So this, that's an important distinction here, but I've been told I can come off rather terse and direct, and this is all really good news. So, Admir, next slide. So we just covered the advance. The second issue that everyone was anxiously awaiting was the layoffs. So we're going to provide an update of the plan and then give you a potential layoff number. A hiring freeze, that's going to remain in effect except for essential positions. Retirements. In addition to the vacancy cuts, we've identified only 42 retirements that will not be filled at the end of this year. Retirements are running lower than projected, but we expect them to pick up substantially, in 24-25. Let me give you the reason for that. It'll be the third year of the BTF and BCSA contracts. That's how their retirements are calculated. So there's going to be a dip this year. Next year's the third year. There'll be a greater than average number next year. That's another reason for our 2-year plan. I'm going to digress a little here. Why we didn't dramatically just lay off all the numbers that our formulas told us. We are pretty confident there's going to be quite a bit of retirements next year. We didn't want to leave ourselves short of teachers because we won't be filling those retirements next year, a good portion of them. So again, it's a calm, measured plan that looks out more than just the immediate year. Vacancy cuts, I've reported on this, and we've pretty much finalized them. 42 in the central office, 145 at the schools for a total of 187. For those who are rather contentiously pointing central office versus the schools, I've given the percentages there of the those vacancy cuts compared to the total staff counts. Our next point, we will reduce 35 coach, TOSA, ITC positions and move the staff back to the classroom. This will result in bumping. But before I describe that, here's a benefit of that decision. 9 of these coaches are special ed teachers. We haven't been able to hire special ed. We've had a shortage of special ed teachers for 3-4 years. Well, we just found 9. So that's just a smart move and necessitated by the current situation. Use of district reserves. Again, a plan to mitigate layoffs. The superintendent has committed $80 million of the district reserves to implement this plan, to begin to align staffing and enrollments and to mitigate layoffs. Now, we are estimating total layoffs of 30 staff based upon that information above. We're not shying away from that number, but truly it's an estimate. It's an educated guess at this point. This number could change based upon greater retirements, the impact of bumping, changes in leaves, and several other factors. Here's where our district differs from others in Western New York and our ability to give an exact guaranteed number. We have 7,000 employees. We have about 300 retirements every year, and it's been that way on average, but they're going to be low this year and high next year. And lastly, we have 400 to 500 people out on leave at any time for fairly long periods of time. Those numbers fluctuate. So with all those variables and all those sizable numbers in play, our best estimated guess is 30 layoffs to right-size the district, on top of cutting the vacancies and the retirements. Another thing one of my colleagues pointed out, every year we have temp staff. Some of those temp staff may not return. Now that's a normal occurrence, but maybe more of them won't return than usual. These are all best guesses based upon the information we have available. And it was taken with great, great care. Edmure, next slide, please. So the projected impact on staffing versus enrollment. With potential layoffs of 30, we will still manage to address our most fundamental structural issue. We will reduce our FTEs by 259 between grants and the general fund. We're beginning to bend that red line. And this isn't just a fancy graph or illustration. This means we're basically keeping the district out of serious financial trouble. So again, the superintendent's plan is an excellent surgical approach to a very difficult situation. Standing back 110 staff to the school-based budget, and yet still getting the total FTE and the fundamental problem addressed. Edmure, next slide, please. So we've addressed some of those issues that everyone's been waiting for, the add backs and the potential layoffs. Let's get into the level 3 budget. The first few columns are level 1, level 2, which we have meetings on and discussed in depth. The yellow column is level 3. We're expecting revenues of $1,082,000,000, which I'll address in some detail on the next slide. Our expenditures are expected to be $1,165,000,000. That leaves us at the end of level 3 with an $83 million deficit. Our 4-year plan was projecting a $29 million deficit next year. The 4-year plan, it's important to know, it foresaw or projected out everything that we're dealing with. And it included the reduction of all the FTEs in the ARPESA plan. That's why the deficit was less than what we're projecting now. At the bottom in the blue rows, this is most important. Our beginning general fund balance, $375 million. If we have the deficit of $83 million next year, that will reduce our total general fund balance to $292 million. A couple of things to note. Please remember that the total reserves are reduced by restricted and allocated items. They currently total about $200 million in the current year. So you always got to be conscious of that. You can't just take the 292, the gross number. The restrictions are legal. The allocations are done by the superintendent when the budget's passed. One other thing you might want to quickly note on our level 3 revenues, they're expected to go up 1.6% from the current year's budget, while our expenditures are expected to go up 5.7%. That's what causes the $83 million deficit. Edmure, next slide. I'll take a deeper dive into the revenues and expenditures now. Level 3 budget detail, revenues. You've seen this graph before, or this chart before. The yellow column is the final state budget, along with all our other revenue sources. The superintendent's accomplished everything that I just discussed, or included everything I just discussed in her plan, even without receiving one dime extra from the final state budget. There was no additional revenues that accrued to the district. However, with that said, our grand total revenues are expected to be $1,082,000,000, next year. That is $17 million greater than the current year, a 1.6% increase. There are a few lines that increased. Medicaid, we're expecting those revenues to go up $1 million. Sales tax, we're expecting that number to go up $2.8 million. And even though the final state budget was disappointing for Buffalo, it still went up $20 million or 2.2%. Interfund revenue, someone had asked the question in a previous meeting. That number went down 7.8 million. That's due to the loss of indirect income from the Art Besser grant. I'll take questions at the end on revenues. Edmure, next slide, please. Here's our detailed expenditure budget in level 3, again, in the yellow columns. Right now, in level 3, we have 5,101 FTEs. The current general fund FTE is 4,936. So the general fund FTEs actually go up 165. This is why this budget was also one of the most technically challenging. The level 3 budgeted FTE count is up 165 positions, even though I just indicated to you the total FTE count for the district will be down. Because this is the net impact of adding all the Art Besser FTEs, which were grant funded, then cutting vacancies, retirements, and layoffs, and then adding back the superintendent add backs. Never before has there been such a transfer from grant-funded expenditures into a general fund, and that's what made this budget year, one of the reasons that made it so challenging. If you go down to the bottom, our FTEs are up 165, and we have a $63 million increase in expenditures, or 5.7%. On the next slide, I'll go into the largest variances. Edmure, next slide, please. I did hand out a bound level 3 budget book for any detailed analysis you may have. But the largest increases in costs that we just looked at, salaries and benefit increased by a combined $39 million, or 12.6%. That's due to the increase in 165 FTEs, contract increases, and associated benefit costs. These next 2 points we're bringing up because they are true problem areas for the district that we can hopefully focus upon and make some improvements to in the coming years. First one is somewhat out of our hands. Charter tuitions increased by $16 million, or 10%. Those are due to projected higher enrollments, which are slowing, but large and negative increases to the underlying formulas for both the general and sped populations. The state, I'd say, went arbitrarily, changed those formulas that will cost the district about $10 million of that $16 million. I'm bringing up SPED-related budgets here. The superintendent and I have had numerous discussions on this. The level 3 budget shows 45 more FTEs than in the current year and an additional $6 million. It brings the total SPED budget to $143 million, almost as much as the general ed budget. This has been an issue with the district and across New York State that no one's really been able to solve yet. And we think we're up to the challenge, and the superintendent has suggested bringing in a consultant that can bridge the gap between the SPED department and the services they provide and the financial reimbursement side. There just seems to be a disconnect. Because those costs do not mirror exactly a growth in IEPs. Contracts, they increased by 12 million or 31%. These were largely due to a few items that were in our BESR that was decided upon they were necessary to move back into the general fund. IT-related costs of 3.7 million, staff development of 2.2, health services, the nursing contract, 1.6, summer school, say yes, 1.5, pre-K, say yes, 1.4, and security costs, training for security officers of 560,000. Equipment rentals and repair from the prior chart increased by 6 million or 14.2% due to an increase in IT of 5.7 million for student and staff devices. And plant, 2.3 million, land improvements at Riverside Stadium and playground construction. From the prior chart again, supplies, textbooks, and softwares increased by 4.8 million or 21% due to increases in WASET, IT software, and the Evolve software and services for our scanners of 848 million. So again, this budget, I've actually looked at some other districts' budget. You can see that they cut or put in lower budget numbers than we have for these very necessary programs. So we're not fudging any numbers. We're loading this budget up with everything that's necessary for a district our large and complex. Offsetting these increases are decreases in the following areas. Debt service will decrease by 9.9 million or 9% as we continue to pay off our existing debt. This decrease is offset though by a similar decrease in building aid. The amount of building aid we receive is basically the same amount as our debt service. That's how proper financing for your capital projects work. A good point on that, the majority of our existing debt will drop to $250 to $300 million at the end of next year. The contingency will decrease by 6 million or 67%. The current year amount of $9 million was due to an estimate of the BTF contract. Seems like 30 years ago, it was only 12 months ago when we didn't have all that information yet to put it in a detailed fashion into the budget, so we loaded a bunch up into contingency. And there, next slide. So, let's say this meeting ends in a very positive fashion after all the work and input that's been put in there. What happens in level 4? The superintendent will decide upon the allocations of the 110 school-based FTE APEX. The budget department will complete a few meetings with all cost centers for a final review. The superintendent has requested another review of central office staff levels. The budget department will update projections and budgets for the following expenditures that total over $393 million. Our benefit calculations are not straightforward or simple because we're self-funded. And charter tuitions. We're gonna have a meeting with the state special ed division on the special ed payments and charges from the charter schools. And it was rather a positive meeting. Hoping to have a couple of more and get some clarity on these negative changes to the formula. And we'll review the charter tuition budget again. Lastly, grants will continue to look for new funding opportunities. I think there's an encouraging one that might fund 5 or 6 social workers. But we're going to stress this. We are not going to add staff. We don't need any more. But we will move them from the general fund into this new grant, which is highly beneficial to the district and our general fund reserves. So we feel that what was presented tonight, and again, all the thought and meetings and input and feedback and discussion and debate should be the basis of the budget that we vote on May 15th. We really don't see any, and maybe I'm speaking personally, we really don't see the benefit of any further tweaking. Time is running short. This is a very, very well thought out budget. So at the end of level 4, we produced a superintendent proposed budget that we hope that you, along with updated school-based budget summaries, that will include the superintendent's allocations. Okay, admin, next slide.
Questions.
So, we also have to update our 4-year plan by June 30th. This is the most important financial planning document of the district. It foresaw everything that we're underwent this year. And I think we made smart and right pivots that caused a few variances, but I'm really behind this 2-year plan. The 4-year plan will include projections for all funds, general grants, debt service, and capital projects. This plan will include our first borrowing in approximately 10 years to include Da Vinci Buff State and other selected projects from the Building Condition Survey. The 4-year plan will also include accelerated planning for building closures over the next 2 to 3 years. That plan is required by the city, the control board, and the state. Admin, next and last slide. Couple of points. Tough situation, creative thinking. We should not lose sight of all the good things that are in this budget and that have been accomplished. We're in a better position to deal with the current challenges than most districts, thus the rather creative 2-year plan. From a financial planning and cash flow perspective, there will no longer be substantial vacancy savings. This has a large impact on our projected cash flows. We can't rely on them anymore for budgetary savings. We have to manage better with the resources provided. There's no room for unbudgeted requests after we agree upon this budget. So with that, I thank you very much. And questions?
Thank you, Chief Barnes, for a very detailed presentation. Yet again, I am going to open it up to questions. I know we don't have a lot of time, and I just wanted to offer a little bit of a recap on my end as well. And I just wanted to reiterate that, one, we aren't the only district that is in a tough financial state or that has to make tough financial decisions, and that this is a very challenging budget, and there has been a lot of conversation and dialogue that has gone into this. And I think a couple of the key things that you shared is that this is a mindful plan, and I'll be the first to say that I had questions and you know, had to wrap my brain around this proactive plan of moving something out in a slow and phased approach. And there is a transition, and transition is difficult. We are aligning the budget with the goals. We are understanding that this did not happen overnight to get us into this space, and it's not going to change overnight. That takes time. And anytime you try to shift culture or you try to transition, you have to allow the space for that to happen. And I think that understanding that this is a mindful plan that is keeping in mind the students as well as the staff is huge, and that it encompasses our new reality. We're not pretending that it doesn't exist, but we are moving into it in a phased approach so that we can all get behind it. And I just want to reiterate that we are never going to make everyone happy. It isn't going to happen. We have to make tough decisions, and we have to do what is best for the district. But we are being as proactive as possible to move through that space, and as thoughtful as possible. And it is not going to be comfortable from start to finish. And I just wanted to throw that out there because I know that there's a lot of rumors and conversations and frustrations, and rightfully so, because change is hard. But I just want us all to remember that this is a step in moving in that direction, and we are doing it. And thank you, Superintendent Williams, right, for that mindful approach that we're taking to pause and make sure that we are reflecting on what this looks like. Board Member Scott, I am opening it up to questions, and I know that you have a question and a tight schedule, so I'm going to kick it off to you first.
Thank you, Chairwoman McEachen. So just first, Chief Barnes and Superintendent Williams, thank you for all the work that's gone into this budget process. I know it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy for us as board members. And I really appreciate, especially you, Dr. Williams, for just being so inclusive, hearing the voices of stakeholders, from our teachers to parents to students, taking the time to respond to almost, if not every single email that we've received. It really, I think, means a lot to folks to see that the superintendent is taking the time to respond to people that are contacting us. So two questions, well, maybe three. The first one is the toughest one. Do we have a sense, with potential layoffs, we have a sense of where those layoffs could come from?
I'll give the general comment, and then Chief McGee might want to elaborate. Larry, it's a complicated process in our environment. So right now, no. We're moving the TOSAs back. They start a bumping process, and then there's other moving pieces. Tammy and her team are up to the task, but it's a Herculean task. It's a very difficult, time-consuming task. Chief McGee.
But what I can share is that as it becomes available to us, as we begin to know how some of this is shaking out, certainly the board will be informed, along the way. So we won't wait until the very end when it's all happened and just, pass the information on. As we begin that process, I will keep the board informed on what it's looking like.
So, Board Member Scott, thank you for that question. One of the things I want to say, I got to say it, we have a transformational leader. Dr. Williams is very involved in the very finite pieces of the work because she doesn't want any mistakes to happen. So we're very conscious of every decision that's made. There will not be a layoff letter with my name signed to it without the approval of Dr. Williams and her looking it over and making sure that there has been data-driven decisions regarding this. And this was not a very strategic move based on the need of the district and based on the enrollments and all of that stuff. So there's some very finite criteria that must be met before a layoff letter is approved by Dr. Williams coming from my office or myself. And that will hopefully be very few for a district of our size. We're very, very conscious of making sure that we know that these are livelihoods of individuals and things like that. One of the things that Chief Barnes did mention was temporary teachers. Temporary teachers are on a temporary assignment. Those are encumbered positions by teachers that are tenured and perhaps on a leave, or there are teachers that may have been given a temporary assignment because they have not been approved for a probationary assignment. So temporary teachers may be moved out, but it's something that we're going to try to do at a very small scale because we are a district that's very large, that have our average teacher age group is around in the mid-30s. So we have teachers that are out for lengths of time due to maternity and paternity reasons. So we need those teachers. Our temporary teachers are important to us. So if we don't have them in the assignment that they were in last year or previously in, we're looking to find a new assignment for them. So we're trying to do this very on a minimal scale. I hope that we'll find that Mr. Chief Barnes' numbers are accurate and on point with what he had indicated before.
Thank you. And then my other two questions. So first, Chief Barnes, you mentioned that it looks like we are bringing back 44 student support staff.
Yes.
Am I right to assume, because under the level 2 budget, we are looking at a cut of 10 guidance counselors, 7.5 psychologists, and 20.6 social workers? Am I right to assume that those are being restored?
Larry, I want to make this one real clear. Any vacancies or retirements in those areas, those positions will be cut. It's the live bodies that are going to be invited back.
Okay.
The whole premise of us, we're cutting vacancies and we're not filling retirements.
Okay. And then the other question, which you're probably expecting, the 15 reading teachers that were projected to be cut. Do we have a sense of whether those will be restored, if some of those will be restored, or is it to be determined?
A portion will, but to be determined. That's what the superintendent is doing her third round and really dig down. That's part of that 24 in the next.
Okay.
So again, the super will keep you apprised as the list gets specifically finalized.
Very good. That's all, Chairwoman McEachen. Thank you for allowing me to go first, and I have to run to another commitment. So have a great meeting, rest of the meeting.
Thank you so much. I cannot see if there are hands up. So if somebody virtually be willing to kick Terrence, I physically see your hand up. So you know what? Go for it. It's all you. You're next. Board Member Hurd.
Thank you, Board Member McEachen. And thank you, Dr. Williams and Chief Barnes, for such a very, very lengthy but crucial this overview of the body of work that you guys have done and how we plan on moving forward as a district. So I just have two questions, and my questions is concerning programming. The Buffalo Schools has been putting up a great programming as far as all of the courses that we offer and offer to the community. And with that, like it was mentioned earlier, like School 84, I just want to make sure that that we stay on track, that we can be closely updated to our student needs and what we are, and also working with community partners to try to elaborate on this. And I was happy that you mentioned more conversation about receiving some type of grants that may be available. Are we looking to bring in a couple more people to write grants so we can try to offset some of our costs? And with the programming, does that include the downsizing of schools that may have been reported earlier or that has been spoken of, to see if we can try to collaborate on some of our programs and bring classes together that may be, have not perhaps smaller class sizes, so we can bring people together that can actually teach these classes also.
Good questions, Mr. Hurd. At the present time, there's nothing in the budget for an additional grant writer. And as we accelerate our planning for our school closures, we will certainly, a component of that will be any potential financing to help in that process.
Okay, and our programming?
When you
will
say
be affected
programming,
by the potential layoffs or position cuts?
So when you say programming, can you just share, are you talking about community partners or are you talking about AP class? You know, what kind of programming are you talking about?
AP classes, our BR courses, our coursework with our special programs like our engineering programs or our skilled trade programs, building. Do those still be enact? As far as we look at towards budget cuts, or will be some of the things that may be affected?
There's no plan to decrease the programming. I've gone out and I've been meeting with students because I really wanted to hear from them. I'm hearing from everybody else everywhere I go. And I've met with students at 4 high schools. I've got one more, next week, South Park. But the students have been really very honest in vocalizing what programs, whether it's athletics, if it's WASED, if it's, they even mentioned a community partner today, that they feel is really helping them to be successful in school. So right now there's no talk about, decreasing any of that. Now the class size may be modified because if a program had 10 kids in it and next door they had 10 other ones, they may be consolidated. But there's, we haven't talked about, getting rid of a program at any school.
Well, those are very smart and logical moves to make. We can, we got like small amount of children in maybe one program or another building to put those programs together and have an instructor for those for that class, that coursework. Those are very, very, like I said, logical moves that we can make. But I just want to just be ensured that I know some of our programming has smaller class sizes and how that would look like for those fair in the future. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you.
Chairwoman, we have Jim McCosey and then followed by Paulette Woods.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jen?
Thank you, Chairwoman Tekin. So I had similar questions, not really around programming, but I'm kind of worried about funding, like title funding where you need positions in place in order for funding to exist or for the actual programs themselves to exist. And if I'm speaking specifically about one particular grant that I know I've talked about with you before, but if the grants start to dwindle, and then are we going to be looking at those positions that fortify those grants as positions that'll be cut because the program itself or the funding or whatever is not as robust as it has been in the past? Like, I'm just worried about, I was just worried about different funding like that. But based on your answer to Board Member Hurd that programming and stuff isn't going to be cut, that's mainly why my hand was raised. So I just also wanted to say that this, the budgets are 4-letter words to me. They always have been, well before I became a board member. But this is, I'd like to say, like Mr. Barnes, the way that you describe what's going down, how it's going down, I'm telling you from just a layman's term point of view, like I get it. I understand it. People ask me questions, I'm able to answer them. I don't have to constantly call you to figure it out. So I really appreciate how you really get into detail, and regardless of how, intense it could be, this is, like Cindy said, this is what we have to do. This is how we got to do it. This is what it's going to take. If we're projecting 30 layoffs over 7,000 positions, then everybody needs to kind of chill out because we're doing a damn good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Woods?
Well, I want to commend the superintendent for listening to everybody, getting so many voices, listening to the board members, and making the decisions transparent. I like that we're transparent and people can see that we're doing the best we can. But with that said, we were sent a amended budget book, and the book does not specify where the restorations are in what our schools are winding up receiving, whether the priorities that we strongly talked about as far as crisis management are addressing mental health issues. So social workers, psychologists, we've talked about this. So I just wanted to know, will you be having more meetings with us? Because I cannot vote on a budget that I haven't reviewed everything that is affecting my department. You're the superintendent, you make the recommendations, you're making them very thoughtfully, but also if need be, then if there needs to be an equity budget passed, a supplemental budget passed, the superintendent proposes, the board disposes. But I'd like to receive the budget and know exactly where those cuts are. And I've expressed to you some problems with schools that have discipline problems, control safety problems, and APs are the answer to that. So
here's what you can be assured of at this point. There were priorities that I heard no matter who I talked to, the board members, parents, even students. Safety is important. The AP positions help to ensure that, and that's why you don't see a reduction there. Social emotional stuff is still happening in our schools in a very big way, which is why we kept all of the student support team staff. Literacy is really important, which is why we made sure that we kept at least one reading teacher at every school. We found ways to make sure that no school is going without having a reading teacher. So there were some big priorities, security. We've put a lot of resources into security and WASED. We've put a lot of resources into our, peacemakers. So there were certain things that we're making sure we keep, but now we're at the equity piece. So I've got a pool of FTEs that you heard Chief Barnes talk about, those 110, and this is where the equity comes in. Now I go into my notes and I start looking at what board members have shared, in their schools they're hearing, what, I'm hearing from the community, what our students are saying, and then I'm looking at our data to see if our data is supporting it, and then that's how the FTEs get dispersed. But before we come back to you on May 14th, I will have had probably multiple conversations so that you know exactly, where that 110 staff, is going to be dispersed.
I thank you so much for that. I respect that. And at some point, Mr. Chief Barnes, I want to go over the amount of monies you put in for the ESSER funds. You said we had to carry over several millions of dollars, and I didn't know if there was any kind of funds from ESSER carried over to offset those things that we had to continue. You were mentioning the security and whatever, or you're saying those are just flat out increases that we had to cover because there are no ESSER funds to cover them.
That is actually, yes, correct. Thank you, Ms. Correct.
Okay, that was a concern because that was a pretty big item. Those are my major questions, and I look forward to meeting with you, Madam Superintendent.
Chairwoman, there are two other hands, Board Member Terry Schuler and President Sharon Kottman, and then I'll add my 2 cents.
Okay. Terry?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I've been having technical difficulties, so I've been jumping on and off. I guess, first of all, I want to say that I'm thrilled to see the student support services, have taken a priority, and, that I've always been a strong advocate for giving the kids what they need in the school building. A couple things. So with the 3,500 kids, the projection of, what we've lost through the last several years, when we were talking about right sizing schools, and Mr. Barnes, I don't want you to get mad at me. I want to say, are we doing the right sizing at central office? I know that they say that we're going to do a review of central office, and I'd like to see that before we see a budget. I'd like to see that formulated because that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing from different groups of people, and if let's just lay it on the line and say, this is what we have, this is who we have, this is who is exempt, this is who's not exempt. And you don't have to give the names, but I think that the community has the right to see that.
Sure.
Okay.
Super. Yeah, sure. One, I got a lot of hard bark on me. I'll never get mad at you.
Okay.
But two, I just want to make a general comment. This is not directed at you, Terry. You're one of the nicest people I've ever met. But we got to this point in the budget by not pitting one side against another.
You know what?
If I could just finish my thought. It's not directed at your question. And not listening to one group who's focused on one issue. In my meetings with the superintendent, no one does this better. She's viewing the whole thing equally and reviewing everything. And we've done that in this central office versus school issue. They're data-driven decisions. In the vacancy cuts, which is all we've made so far, right? We've cut 5% at the central office and like 3% at the schools. Mm-hmm. So everything up to now has been open, has been transparent, and has not pitted one side against the other. We'll provide the information you need and request, but I wanted to say that first.
Okay, and I don't think that anyone's pitting. It's just we have two arms on this body. And, one arm should know what the other, I just think it's good business. I think it's good policy. And I think that it really promotes all of us together as one. It's not pitting. Okay. And I've never thought of it pitting, but I just think that we just need to know that. Then, how I feel about the coaches, not only the coaches, their expertise, that and the teachers on assignment. I've been very, I've explained how I felt about that. But then when we take a look at school buildings that have set up successful programs and have trained teachers specifically, and now this bumping process is going to start, and it's just, I know that it may be unavoidable, but boy, oh boy, we may be creating a mess for students and programs. But that's all I'm going to say, okay?
Okay.
We got you. I mean, it is contractual though, the bumping
Right,
process.
I know that. But it's just hard to just eliminate a group.
Right.
That, and I'm not sure that, I'm not sure if they've been as valued in this process as some of them should be. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Hey, Terry, if you come back for a second.
She can still hear you.
Okay. Remember, the 35 are those not picked by the principals. There's still 80 of them at the schools.
Right, but there's going to be the jumping process or the bumping process.
It's unavoidable. You know that.
Positions right. So you may say you want a reading coach, but it may not be the reading coach that you built your program around. That's what I'm saying. Okay, thanks,
There's
guys.
still 80 there. There's still 80 there.
Right, there's still 80 there. But when you're a principal in a school and you have trained and you've worked with a group of people to move academic achievement and your team is shuffled, kids are affected. That's all okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Shuda. President Kottman?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the fact, Dr. Williams, that you had enough foresight to do this over a 2-year period. I find that very smart. So we got a smart superintendent, if nothing else. Okay. But anyway, I do have some questions. So, and my principals are saying that the special ed department is putting additional classrooms in their buildings. And when asked and questioned about it, they said that there was a 5-year plan, and it's fitting into the 5-year plan of what special ed has and prepared. This board has never seen a 5-year plan for special ed, and I'd like to see it, see what that 5-year plan looks like. Okay, because I'm also wondering, Dr. Williams, if they are taking into consideration in this planning process what equity looks like when we have certain areas that are asking to have special ed students in their area and others are not. And so I'm very concerned about that. I appreciate if that is brought to the board ASAP, because if there is a 5-year plan, certainly the board should be aware of it. We weren't shared, that wasn't shared with us, and all of us are concerned about special ed. I'm very concerned about it. When I'm looking at this budget, my next issue is when I'm looking at this budget, security is not mentioned in the buildings. Okay, we don't, you know how we outline everything else, but we don't outline a slate for security. Why is that? Why is it not listed on the individual budget for the school?
On the schools, we do that from the central office. That's a central office function. That's all. It's
right.
Bookkeeping. Yeah, it's in the central office. It's up 50 officers in the general fund from last year, and over $1.5 million in additional training and the software and maintenance on the Evolve scanners.
Okay.
Huge investment.
Okay. My third question is about cost-saving measures. Okay. I had asked for a report in regards to overtime and things like that. We have not seen it, but we also asked for a vacancy report too. And I'm wondering, in regards to the vacancy report, is there any desire to have a MOU for the sake of equity put in place to make sure that the schools who have consistently not had slots filled? Okay, we've had years of people not having certain positions in certain schools, even though they've budgeted for them. And even though we were told last year that come October, the principals were going to be allowed to use the additional funds to make sure that equity occurred in the building, which never happened, coincidentally, which I'll keep my eye out for this year. But my question is it possible to make sure for equity's sake, that the buildings who have not had people, like a Spanish teacher for 3 years or 4 years, okay, is placed in the schools first? Those students need support. IT teachers, they need support. How is it that we continue not to meet the needs of our students, and we have the ability to make a special request and try to carve out some things? This is an idea that I just came up with, and I welcome the thought process. Of course, it's more work for people, but at the end of the day, it ensures that certain buildings get equity where they have not had equity for years. Okay, you had no problem taking that money back, Jim. I'm glad to see you not getting as much as you used to get. Ha ha ha. For that general fund.
That's going away. It's going away. That's our gift to you, Mrs. Scott.
I'm happy to hear that, but it still is not going to erase my equity concerns in those buildings. Okay, and I'm going to, and for an example, we've had teachers that have signed up to work in certain schools. Other schools post, because of their seniority, they were able to, right after the principals had already prepared, started working with them, they were able to post out or whatever, or were ready to work with them, were able to post out and keep it moving. We need to have a conversation about what equity looks like in these school buildings when it comes to teachers not being vacancies existing in these buildings. I don't think it's fair the way it's being done, and I'd like to take a look at that. There's no reason to respond on it at this point. However, we do need to bring it back to executive affairs and ask the question. MOUs are done on a regular basis. Why aren't we using MOUs to make sure we have more equity in our buildings? is my question for that. So that's something for you guys to think about. Again, that special ed plan, I really want to see it. I'm really concerned about any plan that exists that allows children to be placed in certain districts. And I want to make sure that it's balanced throughout the entire district. Let's see. Question. I got this text to me from a student, a teacher who's about to graduate. Will we possibly in the future be hiring new teachers?
I'll speak for not for a while. I mean, our whole plan is on mitigating layoffs. So you do that first and foremost by not hiring, eliminating vacancies, and not replacing retirements. That's how we can right size. Those dollars have to be removed from the budget.
One thing I want to add to that is, President Cotman, we will hire teachers that are mandated, such as your special ed teachers, our CTE teachers. They are still high in demand. So for the record, for the public to know, if you are looking to go into the teaching profession, no, we're not in the position to hire new elementary ed teachers, but we are in the position to hire multilingual, CTE, world languages, and special ed. So those are areas where we're still experiencing vacancies and we want to hire new teachers. So when you see individuals come through the board packet, you'll see them in those areas only.
Okay, thank you. And
You're
I
welcome.
also just like to say that I noted that for the, I think it's the 19th or 20th year, the city of Buffalo has not increased any funding to the district. And I'd like to also go on record in this particular meeting to note that the city of Buffalo is not assisting us financially with making sure that safe passage happens. I don't know what the mayor's State of the Union, but unfortunately, I was not able to attend today. However, the fact that the city does not have any ownership piece in making sure that safety occurs when most of these issues are happening outside of our schools, and we're trying to get children home safely is a very big concern for me. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chairperson McCutcheon. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown. I think you have a couple closing questions, and I'm just throwing out there that we are way over time, and I want to make sure that we're able to give your work session the time that it deserves as well, Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown. So go ahead.
Thank you, Chairwoman McCutcheon. I just wanted to add my 2 cents. I think Dr. Williams, who people may not know this, but her background is counseling. And this budget also includes some empathy. I'm certainly glad to see that it's been minimized in terms of the classroom, that we're keeping teachers and educators in the classroom, especially since the board has adopted a student-focused outcome governance, because that's going to align with what we're doing. So thank you for that. I think the bumping is a process that happens and not only in the school district, but across the board when you talk about contracts and, corporate America. I mean, that's just the nature of what happens. And so I feel bad about, people who will be bumped, but that's something that I don't think we have any control over. And I'm also finally glad to know that there's a window of opportunity that we left open so that this can continue to be discussed, about the equity, about central staff, about all the other finite things that can get us from point A to point B. So thank you for a lively discussion. Chief Barnes, you always present in a way that, some of us who aren't in finances understand the terminology. So thank you for that. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for a great job. And Chairwoman McCutcheon. Those are my final thoughts on the budget.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kathy Evans Brown.
Thank you.
Superintendent, if you are okay with it, I'm going to end, if that's all right, so that we can move into the next work session. I hope you're okay with that. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we will close finance and ops, and I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Kathy Evans Brown.
Okay, thank you. So good evening. This is the executive affairs portion of our committee meeting. And today, as most of you know, that we have contracted with the Council of Great City Schools. We have a coach, Leslie Grant, who I think is on the panel with us today. And one of the themes that we've adopted ourselves as board and the superintendent, that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. And so that's part of the whole student governance, focused governance. And so today, Leslie is going to talk about, now we always talk about, evaluation of the superintendent, and, that's part of our job, and that's going to happen. But what we also are infusing with this whole student outcome governance, focused governance, is evaluating the board. So we evaluate ourselves as well. So we're in the throes of, listening, to the community, all aspects of the community in Buffalo. That's going to help us inform our goals for the superintendent for the ensuing year, 24-25, and throughout. So goals, even though we kind of touch bases with the 3 goals that was mentioned before Chief Barnes got into his presentation today, real goals, and those of us who are, taking this course with this Great City Schools know that goals generally are from 3 to 5 years, okay? So when you talk about, setting percentages and benchmarks and stuff, particularly with reading, for example, you're not going to see any real change the first year, but you will over the course of time. So generally what they're saying, from the experience that we're experiencing, Jen and Paulette and myself and board member McCutcheon and Sharon Belton Cotman had already taken this course, is that is a learning process. And we're also learning that goals are more significant when they're, up to 5 years. So with that, I'm going to have Leslie Grant talk about the board evaluation further.
Hello.
Leslie?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everybody, and thank you for allowing me to join you for this. Our hope is that this quarterly board self-evaluation, the process becomes something that you all adopt, and it becomes just a regular part of your doing business. It is a very important signal of the culture you're wanting to set at the board table that will be echoed throughout the district. So if the board is willing to evaluate itself in the work it's promised to do, that expectation flows down through the district. So having an understanding about why you're doing this process and your commitment to it and the public's acknowledgement of it and expectation of it is really important. So again, I commend you all for engaging in this work and for being willing to, continue forward with this. So what I wanted to do, as you all know, what we're doing is we have a quarterly tracker, and we are tracking your scores in this self-evaluation framework. So each of you is given a worksheet. These are completely available to the public to see what the framework is and how you are measuring yourselves. Each of the domains in the framework have to do with important steps and transitions in the board's adult behavior that reflect positive steps towards improving student outcomes. The belief that you have adopted with this work is that the purpose of the school board or school board is specifically and exclusively to improve student outcomes. There are many things that you will do, but your job is to do everything you can to make that happen. So this framework outlines some very specific things that you should be aspiring to do and throughout this work. And so I just want to go over this, a few of these. I, again, gave it all to each of you. What we would like to do here is that you, we can sort of popcorn around the screen, I guess. I know that Board Member Scott said he was unable to attend, but he did submit his sheet online earlier. I've not heard, I think everyone here is, except for, trying to see.
Ann Revere.
Okay, Dr. Rivera. Did anybody hear anything from her on submission for this? Okay.
I'm sure she emailed it.
Okay. Well, bottom line is tonight, what we want to do is when we have this meeting, when you have this check-in, to get consensus from you all about where you think you are. So I want you to discuss, just start at the first domain, the vision and goals, and discuss with each other where you think you are. So we will get a read on what you think you've, hurdles you've gotten over this quarter, where you think you might get by the end of next quarter, which is June 30th. So, and I don't want to stop just because we may not have moved out of one of the columns. I do want you to be thinking and talking about different areas on here in terms of aspirational things to look at and do. And one thing to really emphasize with this is not I don't want anyone to get caught up on playing this like a game, like having to score X, Y, or Z. It is important to look at this, to understand the different actions and behaviors. It is not a good habit to get caught up in, like we got X, Y, or Z points. The goal of it is for you all to start, shifting your behaviors in ways that help your students improve their outcomes, not to, brag that you got a score or whatever. So just wanted to make that point. This is a thoughtful exercise, not a, points on the board kind of thing. So, and lastly, as they say, if it's not measured, it's not done, right? What gets measured gets done. So this is our way of staying on track to try and measure that transition in adult behaviors from the board table. All right, so would somebody pick up and maybe go through the vision and goals and just talk about, you can start over on the left-hand side and talk about a few of those and just have a conversation. If anybody put something down on yours and you want to go ahead and share that, let me know.
Leslie, I'm happy to jump in. Okay. So at this point, for vision and goals, which is the far left column, the first objective is the board has not adopted goals. And we did not do that this quarter. We haven't done that yet. We know we're in the process of moving there, but I did not mark that for next quarter because it'll likely happen the quarter after that, just based on timing. And so I think that we're on track, and when we evaluate next month, I will be excited to check that other box, knowing that we're progressing and that we're moving in that direction. The board has not consistently demonstrated the ability to distinguish between inputs, outputs, and outcomes. I did mark that as well, because I think while we're making progress and we're moving, I don't know that we fully have our brains wrapped around that. And I do believe as we continue to go, we will get there. We're just not quite there yet in terms of that transition. And I think it'll align with the goals and guardrails as we flush out that full process. And then the last one is the board has not hosted opportunities to listen to the vision of the community during the previous 36-month period. And I did not get to put an X there because we have now done that, which is a change from the last time that we did this where we had to mark that. So I was excited to leave that open.
Yay. All right. Any thoughts about that? Anybody have any disagreement with those assessments? We know you have not. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying I'm in agreement. I would.
Okay, all right. Yep, so we know you haven't adopted goals. We do have a date. You have largely concluded your listening, but if anybody is watching tonight and you have not given your 2 cents, the board has a survey that's available. I believe there's still another additional listening session, but you are working on that. The hope is that by our August 9th meeting, we all will be very comfortable with the data we've received, and we will have some educational work for you to do before that meeting. But at that meeting, you will have drafted. This process may take until the fourth quarter, but anyway, you are headed in the right direction. So, and I also agree.
No, I was going to say, after your comment, I'd like to make a comment about that.
Yeah. I was going to say, I also agree with the first one in terms of the ability to distinguish between inputs, outputs, and outcomes. I would love to have a workshop on that when we get into this a little bit further. I think there's some work that needs to happen there, and just in terms of alignment of thinking, especially before we get set on goals and guardrails. So, yes, President Cotman?
Well, maybe I should wait till the end, but I think that based on our survey, I would like the board to consider maybe extending that opportunity for our people to provide us additional information through a survey, particularly since we don't have to meet until August. I thought that if we extend it to the end of the month, we should be able to get more participants if we just do a survey only approach. So I'd like for us to think about that. We can talk about it at the end of the meeting. Because right now I'm not pleased.
You talk about answering those 3 questions. That survey.
Putting the full campaign out there for that survey to get the survey's questions done. Input back from the audience. I would like a decent amount of feedback, and we don't have it at this point, and I'm not pleased with that. And I don't think the board should be pleased with it either. As a board member, each of us should have at least 100 people who we can depend on to support us in a survey and get us some information back. So think about that. We'll come back to that. I don't want to get off of this, but I think it's important that if we're going to use that survey and we're going to do the values and the visions of the community, that we need to have a sampling, a decent sampling. And I'm proud to say my workshops have been very good, but as far as participation, but I worked them. I called people, I got the work in, and I did a lot of work to get that going. So I just want us to think about that and talk about it at the end of the meeting, Dr. Evans Brown. Sorry to interrupt, Leslie. Sorry.
Yeah,
but I
know that again, McKecken has a hard stop at 7. She indicated, so I do want to get through this, but I'm happy to stay on and talk about that if you need any thoughts about that. So we are, I think, clearly here. I don't think next quarter that we will move beyond that. In terms of the vision and goals, we are in the not student outcomes focused column yet, but in terms of looking out at things that we could pick up, I think you're using a process right now, and this is why you look out into the last column to look at what's visionary and aspirational. We're using a process right now which is including students, parents, staff, and community members in a way that, and this is to your point, Sharon, that leads them to express ownership. So the larger the pool that you pull from, the more they will trust that the work is based on what they believe. So one of the things I do want to point out is, well, I don't think we need to go into that one any further. So clearly we're there. We have a few months to go before we can move out of that one. And again, I would like to maybe have a small workshop around the inputs, outputs, and outcomes. In terms of the values and guardrails, anybody want to mention those, where they think we are with that?
Well, I think,
okay.
I think, just to chime in that we're cognizant of it. We know the importance of, working with our superintendent in collaboration to adopt, goals and guardrails. And so we can't put a check at that first box, but I
For
do
which
believe,
one? I'm sorry.
are we at
Yeah.
values and guardrails?
Values
Am
and
I-
guardrails. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. So we can't put a check mark there yet because the board has not adopted goals.
Goals, correct.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
This
I do
quarter.
believe that in collaboration with the superintendent, that guardrails will be based on the community's values because once we get that data and surmise it in August, we'll have a better gauge of what those goals and guardrails will look like. Correct?
Right.
So I
And I
think
do.
work in progress.
Yep.
Work in progress.
It's a work in progress. All of this is. We will not by June 30th, which is the end of the next quarter. We move this out a little bit. By June 30th, we will not have adopted the goals and guardrails. So we're just next quarter estimate will be the same. So, but you do get the check as you did for the other one in terms of the board hosting the opportunities. So. And we will need to get very heavy, and I will need each of you to study this much more deeply when we have those sessions before we set the goals and guardrails, because there's lots of information in here that you'll need to pay attention to about that. So in terms of monitoring and accountability, I think we're still, anybody argue against us still being in the same, you've not adopted goals, so we're not moving out of that one yet. When we get to the monitoring calendar, it will be the superintendent's team who sets up the monitoring calendar based on the time that information on the data is available. You will need to require, and the board will be responsible for ensuring that each goal is monitored 4 times a year and the guardrails are monitored at least once a year. So anyway, we're not here yet. This may take 2 more periods before we get there. But again, I want you to look at the top on this one as in terms of accountability. It has to do with your time as well. I did give you all a time use assignment, so I'm not clear if anybody's gotten that done yet. But we'd love to go over that with anybody that wants to. The proportion of your time that you are spending dedicated to your goals and guardrails and monitoring those goals, those student outcome goals, is what we are going to start tracking. So when you have those adopted, we are really hardcore going to start tracking that time. And what we are trying to ensure is that what you focus on during your time together as a board, what you require the district to focus their staff time on, is what you have said is important. So if you have said these goals and these guardrails are what the community wants us to do, we have understood the data from the district, this is what we want to do, we want to make sure that that is what you're spending your time doing. So if you look down in the communication and collaboration one, the next domain, if you look over into the yellow column, the second item down, the board tracks its use of time in the board authorized meetings, and you will begin categorizing every minute you use as one of the following: either goal setting, goal monitoring, guardrail setting, guardrail monitoring, leadership evaluation, voting, community engagement, and then other. So all of those things that are called out as singular items, we believe are things that do have a positive impact on your work and are constructive ways for you to use your time. Other is other. So those are the kind of things that the public should see your the structure of your meetings changing to. Anybody have thoughts about anything else in this that you've brought up in your own review?
No, I just want to make a note that in one of the classes, we have some cohorts from, I believe, South Carolina, and they've been in this work for about 2 years. And so, they're more, ahead of us, so to speak. And it's really amazing how they started just like us, stuttering and, trying to make sense of it, but they are on their way. And so it is, a great thing to see and hear how they have made that progress.
And they are actually on their second phase, so they've been in it for 4 or 5 years already. So once you get, once you move all the way through the period of your goals, then you begin the process again. So it's just an iterative process. If you have 5-year goal period, every, when you're approaching the end of that period, you would go back to the community and reset those. But yes, they are, it gets easier every time you do it. So one of the things I wanted to mention in this communication and collaboration, there are pieces of this that you can pick up before you adopt your goals. And one of the things I want to bring out here was, if you look in the green and blue, the meeting and mastering student outcomes focus columns, the board made no edits to the board's regularly scheduled meeting agenda during the meeting and during the 3 business days before the meeting, unless a state of emergency was declared. And then the other one was the board received the final version of materials to be voted on at least 7 calendar days before the board authorized public meeting, during which the materials would be considered. I think these 2 are very easy to pick up, and that we can work with the agenda diet that we need to be looking at in terms of that. It's really critical in terms of board members' time, staff time, to be able to receive and be able to thoroughly review materials beforehand, so that you can start to ask questions that are thoughtful and meaningful and drive the positive behavior changes that you want. So,
Leslie, just to add, when you talk about the agenda diet, so we have had brief conversations about that transition, with President Cotman, Superintendent, and Board Member Scott. And so I looked at Atlanta Public Schools. They're in this work as well. How long have they been in the work? Because I really like, how they did their agenda, and it's it's at a point where they're doing 50% of the work in student outcome.
I don't know. I mean, I would think that might be a glancing view. I don't know that that's a real time use. I don't know that they've actually done the time use evaluations. So I would just say, let's always look at the, behind the curtain. One of the things I would love to develop with y'all is a really forward visualization of this work on your website, so that people understand immediately when they come here what you're doing, why you're doing it, have access to all the materials, have access to your monitoring calendar, can see your monitoring reports, have access to your board self-evaluations, your time use. Like, just put it all out there. If y'all are going to do the work, you should put it out there. And so making sure that what you are doing is very clear and present will build an enormous amount of trust with the community. So that's one of my desires for you. Yes. And all right, so unity and trust is the next domain. We are just tonight and the next quarter, we will continue to stay until we adopt the goals. But I did want to look at some things here. In terms of unity and trust, there is a lot of work here that has to do with your operating procedures, right? The way you conduct business amongst yourselves with the superintendent. And this lends itself to a look at your board operating procedures and policies. And I just want to everybody make sure that you are paying attention to this one when it gets time to review your board operating procedures, that nobody is, shocked that we're going to do that. Or if you have thoughts about that, please, start thinking about that now. So, did anyone have anything here that they wanted to call out? As with conflict of interest, committees, ethics. And
I can say something on that. I think it's important that the board understands and remembers that they are, unless they are representing the board officially, that they are not representing the board at all. They are representing themselves, and that they put themselves out for a liability in the event something should happen as a result of that. And you have to, even when you're speaking to the news, you should be reiterating throughout the entire conversation that this is the opinion of board member so-and-so and so-and-so, and not speaking on behalf of the entire board. That is, it needs to be clear. The official spokesperson for the board is the president of the board. And oftentimes that gets misled. Some information was put out a while ago about there would be no layoffs. Had I done that interview, I would never have boxed the board up or the district up to say there may not be any layoffs, because we were facing challenging times. So we would always leave that open, that option open. Then now someone had to backtrack and say, yeah, there may be some layoffs now, when in essence, it shouldn't have even been an issue of conversation, because if you know that you're going through hard financial times, you should not be saying certain things as a board member. So I encourage board members to remember that, because you can get yourselves into something bigger than what you think it is.
Yeah, there is, it is very difficult. The skills and, relationships you have to have a lot of times to get into office have little relevance to your job once you are in office. And sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish between those two things. But bottom line is, no individual member of the board has any power. The board as a whole has power. It is not incumbent, or it is irresponsible for any one person, any one member of the board, to act in a way that influences any of the district business, any of the, any of the vendors with the district. So it is, it's a very, very important boundary to not acknowledge. So thank you for that.
But that also includes all members, no matter what your title. It takes 5 votes to speak for the board.
Yes.
No, it does not. The president of the board, let's frame this right. The president of the board has the given authority to speak on behalf of the board. Whether you like that or not.
On behalf of the board. That means 5 votes and the board's opinion.
That has nothing to do with 5 votes. We're talking about making a statement. If I go on record to make a statement as president of the board because of a meeting that we've had, and I reiterate something, that's a different thing. I'm not getting into it with you right now, Paulette. If you want to talk about this offline, we can. Okay? Thank you.
You got the point.
We are.
You got the point as well, Paulette.
We will be reviewing operating procedures. That will be very clear with everybody. So that is one of the things we want to make very clear.
The disrespect has to stop.
In terms of continuous improvement, one of the things I want to pull out here has to do with time use and reporting that. Again, I think that's very important for you all to understand what you're spending your time on, because what you're spending your time on is what, each and every one of you is an adult. You've signed up, you've run for office, you've committed to the work, but you haven't, you don't desire to give your lives away to this because you all, just want to sit and talk about stuff. It's very important to understand that the reason you come together, the time you spend together, has to be very targeted and very specific to some of the things that we know are positive in terms of improving student outcomes. If the work is not about that directly, specifically, and meaningfully, then you are choosing to spend each other's time in ways that y'all choose to do that. But the other piece here is that the board, item 2 in this one, it says the board tracks the average annual cost of staff time invested in governance during its annual self-evaluation. So annually, this includes the time any staff member has invested in preparing for, attending, and debriefing after meetings, This includes all board authorized public meetings as well as all closed sessions and all hearings. So every time the staff is engaged with servicing board member inquiries, board member, meetings or whatnot, there is a cost to that. And so once, we can get a effective way of tracking that, that is something that is really important for everyone to acknowledge.
Leslie, is that something that a board member could be assigned to do, or is that something that?
No, that's something that staff needs to track what's being asked of them. So that's something. Yeah, yes, that is something that superintendent would need to. It takes time to do that. So, but it is I think a healthy practice to build in again. If you are unaware of what you're doing, you are going to continue doing it. If it is ineffective, then you don't know. So becoming aware of what we're doing, acknowledging our behaviors, becoming present to them is a way that you can begin to change those behaviors. So all of you came together. We all are engaged with each other in this work, which is really rich and beneficial. But it is done so based on your understanding that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. And every single one of us on this call knows that there are things we need to do with our adult behaviors so that we're not continuing to perpetuate the results you have for students in BPS. You want better for them, we got to be better. So I am going to tally this. We're where we are, and it is fine. The purpose of this again is to pull pieces out of this, look at some things that we can do. I'll make a note of that. We do have an implementation committee, which is doing sort of the underlying work of this monthly. We have a meeting on Friday, so we'll make note of the things we brought up today and that we can be working on as we go through before we get the goals and guardrails set. Any further questions for me along this evaluation or around this evaluation or the work?
Leslie, I have a question. So when I went through, I have a question because I want to make sure I filled out this form right. When I went through, I put X where it said we have not done. Was I just supposed to leave it blank, or was I supposed to put an X? I'm trying to figure out how what was the proper way to do it.
It's a little confusing. The first column is the double negative kind of thing. Just put an X in those columns, and then what I want to do is I will always share the sheet with you. I just want you to keep looking at it. Put X's where you think we have done something. So you have not adopted goals. So in that first column, the board has not adopted goals. Yes, we have not. Again, that first column, the first one is tricky. When we get beyond that, it's a little more clear to see what you do. But just put an X in those columns. Don't put numbers. I'll work on the tally until we get that done, and getting a good habit with that. So.
Yeah, it keeps us focused.
I have a question. When we made a copy, does that automatically get shared with you, or so in order for us to turn it in, so to speak?
You don't need to. Yeah, you don't need to. I just want y'all, the reason I'm sharing it with you is I want you all to be thinking about it so that you can have this conversation. So if there's anything tonight where you believe that we were not in agreement, then you can think about it ahead of time and bring it up. Yeah. So I'm not keeping score with those either.
I'm behind on the other assignments, so I'm just like totally freaked out about what I got to turn in and what I don't.
I trust that each and every one of you would have spoken up. If you do not agree with that, let me know. Right now we are at excuse me, 0 for every one of the domains. We don't anticipate moving out of that again until we get past our goals and guardrails. So if anybody is not in agreement with that, speak now, forever hold your peace. We're going to record that. And then I do want you to adopt it at your next board meeting. You need to make a formal action to start adopting these so that you all are on the record agreeing to this, okay?
I just do want to mention too that, we did bring up what we're not doing well, and we are working on it, but to maintain and put something down so that future boards, or if we stay on the board, stay on the same track, not just in this type of forum, but like when instances frequently happen, or some sort of like document like that, so we can refer to it, just as examples have been brought up, people speaking up for the board as individuals, but not like those specific instances. What's the what is the suggestion as to what not to do, how to do it? I know what we're going to fill out and what we're trying to do to adopt goals, but I'm looking for like that extra, like an FAQ or something like that can kind of like guide us if we run into a situation like that, because I currently don't see anything like that for us. And that's what I'm looking for in these trainings. If we come across it, how do we approach it? How do we make sure that we're all in agreement when we talk about it? Because when we get together on these calls, it's very specific, it's very purposeful, and there's no room to really bring up instances where we can learn from these things. So something that's documented that we can learn from specific instances that are very much so reoccurring.
So I would suggest, one of the things I brought up with you was like having a specific deep dive maybe on inputs, outputs, and outcomes, and just looking at the way that tracks through your work. One of the things I think I would recommend is going back. I pulled November of last year for you all, put that in a time use evaluation for y'all to like really sit down and spend some time doing that. I think that's really, it says a lot about that. But if there's if you want to have, and I know we just, the time is limited. Y'all spent a long time on that budget conversation, and I would just encourage you, like every time you spend together, what is the amount of time worth? What does it get you? Okay. And so if y'all want to have, I'm happy to pull together a session. If you wanted to have something specific, let's do that. Up to y'all. But having, I don't know if I can share screen.
I think what I'm asking for is something so there is no time being spent on it, because we talk about it so much during these sessions, like having a document that says, if this was to happen, this is how, this is suggested way in order to deal with it, or whatever, something we can look at on our own if we run into situations, because a lot of times we just go on and on about things that we experience as individuals, and that takes up a lot of time in the call.
I wonder if the
This is not what you're asking. This is
policy-
the tracker, which gives you, the total scores from each one. That's not what you're asking about, Jennifer.
Jennifer's probably talking about policies that are in place, and I know Cindy was taking a stab at looking at them. Terry Schuler and I both looked at them too. There's a lot of policies, and what was brought up today is certainly in those. That policy book is huge.
Yeah.
It really is. It's there.
Yeah, we're gonna. One of the recommendations in this work is to make sure that you're reviewing your board operating procedures at least annually. So I do want to do that. First of all, we need to go through and edit probably heavily the board operating procedures. We talked about this a little bit. Your board policy manual, the board policy manual, is enormous and contains probably 90% or more of things that are actually administrative policies or regulations that do not fall within the governance role of the board. They are within the administration's purview to set and enact and monitor. So that policy diet would include having a bright line between those things. The things that remain within the board's purview, our suggestion is that your goals are those are your goal policies are in there, your guardrail policies. Those are the things that you have set are your priorities. Also, anything that has to do with your relationships with each other, your authority, how you are assembled, your way you're elected, those things that have to do with your governance authority, and then the authority you delegate. So how you delegate power to the superintendent and what that authority looks like. So the things that relate to the board and your role and power become much more manageable because you can pull them out and see them. And then having the board operating procedures, again, how you want to interact, your expectations around your board meetings, your expectations around receiving materials. Those are the things that that we just need to, really set in stone with that board operating procedure. So.
Yes, Leslie, I understand exactly what you're saying. I understand the importance of our goals and guardrails, and also important, the importance of student outcomes and what our board should be focused on to achieve the highest goals for our students and the best possible outcomes, not only for our students, but for this district and our community. But what I do not understand is how we can alleviate ourselves from like very important conversations. Like we speak about today, we spoke about our budget and with some great concerns about our budget. And I believe these are focused towards student outcome also, because it's particularly best way to asset what programs are going to which area and how they're going to be funded. So, but we talking about, other situations like layoffs or possibly cutbacks or possibly, what's going to happen with our special education teachers, or what's going to happen with our like career technical teachers, counselors, our social workers, psychologists in the schools. These are very important subjects also that we have to address as a board. And I feel that, and to give public awareness also, because a lot of the questions that the board members are saying at these sessions, and a lot of the answers that we're looking for are questions that was asked to us. And we don't have too many platforms that we can go to and speak with the superintendent. We know the superintendent is very busy, but we don't have too many assets that we can go to administrative staff members, other board members, to try to conform these type of answers or see our outcome and what can we work for, because we're voting on a budget to support this. So I think that we should be informed any way that we can, especially at a board meeting.
So big pots, that's a very heavy discussion. I would say that if you are committed to this work and you actually want to follow along with the research that states what the behaviors of board members are that actually help improve student outcomes versus what sort of we all feel we've all
I know you're reflecting about the behaviors of board members because of the temperament of this board, but I think as a majority, most people are
of each of
delegating for the best outcomes for the children.
Well, okay, so again, the practice that y'all are,
I see your hand.
All of this work has to do with research that has been that's been put together over a number of years that aligns with what are behaviors of boards, K-12 education boards. What are behaviors of those boards that most closely align with improving student outcomes, period. Doesn't have to do with Buffalo or any of y'all individually. What are those larger behaviors? That's what this framework was developed on. And so again, if y'all are wanting to participate with this, it is because you have committed to, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work we have here. And so if you're committed to this process, then engaging in it correctly is going to get you further down the road and closer to your stated
Leslie,
goal.
I'm not debating I'm not debating the necessity of the program.
Yep. Nope. Okay. Can I finish? Because I really do think this is important. If you are wanting to engage in this work and continue this work, it is important to understand that there are behaviors that happen that, are counterproductive to moving the work forward on behalf of students and what they know and are able to do. So there are lots of behaviors that get built in over the years that have to do with constituent services. The board is not a constituent services organization. Individual board members are not in charge of constituent services. That is a role, customer service, constituent services, employees of the district, that has to do with the superintendent. The superintendent and her staff are charged with managing all of that. Every time board members get in between those things, it honestly dilutes her power and ability to get those things managed. So when we get to the point, if you are wanting to do, if y'all are wanting to follow through with this and set goals because you believe that actually having some SMART goals and expectations for the district to perform on behalf of kids is important, and that's the way to get here, we will set those. And then what you will do in terms of the budget and supporting the budget is to say, superintendent, we have set these goals. These are the most important priorities that we've come up with. This is what we all agree on. We are giving you these goals. We are giving you these guardrails. These are our expectations for the next 5 years. And then it is her job to explain to you how she has aligned the budget to make sure that those happen. So it is the superintendent's job to align the budget to the priorities the board has set. Those priorities are set based on your desires for students in Buffalo. Now, every time the board comes in and says, wait, we know you have a plan for this, but wait, you know, you need to move these teachers over here, it is very problematic because she cannot come up with a complete, competent strategy that is based on the skill sets that they have, that they are hired to do, not elected to do, but hired to do. She cannot come up with that if there's constantly, you know, pins being pricked into the plan, her strategic plan. So again, your job is setting the goals and guardrails. Her job is strategically enacting them.
Okay, Terry, you had a comment.
Yeah, well, real
Terrence, are you
quick.
done? Go ahead. Terrence,
Real
hold
quick.
on.
What
I
I'd
just wanna
like. Okay.
I just want to make sure that Terrence completed his question.
Well,
Terrence?
thank you, Chairwoman. I wasn't trying to make any impression that that the board's interfere any kind of way with the superintendent and her goals, and we supposed to set the standards for it. I clearly understand that. I clearly understand the purpose of it. What I was saying is that when we had like very important conversations earlier at the committee members meetings, other committee meetings, is that it was some high standards that's being said about the direction of our district and the way it should go, and we're coming to the board listening to that also. And the superintendent did extend their hand to the board members to reach out to us to talk us about the needs of the buildings, especially the district board members, the needs of each building and what they see, and also her working with the APs and reaching out to those buildings also to get a direct letter of what that building desperately needs and what the buildings can fare with or without. So my hat tips off to the superintendent on the strategy and his plan, especially a 2-year plan on doing this. But today we had some very important questions that came up, and with these type of important questions come up, it seems that we may be have a time frame on which we can try to answer or try to get answers about the district and which way it moves, and binding us like that might, I think that's what we're running into now, because parents are concerned. Parents are concerned about where the children are going to be, what size the classrooms are, the process of education, and we're down 4,000 students. So I think that these are very important questions and very important answers that the board are asking that's going to help with student outcomes.
But I'm
That's
just
all I'm
saying,
saying.
but
Thank you, Terrence.
yeah, there's no denying that is an important piece. But the answer needs to come, and the solve needs to come, and the correspondence and communication need to come from the superintendent's office. So so that's a sort of a rethink about the way, like everybody gets into lots of habits. What we're asking right now through this process, again, student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change, is to start observing those adult behaviors that we're doing. Are they productive for what we're wanting, right? So let's just, be very mindful. What are the practices that we're engaged in right now? And let's be willing to look at them, right? And be honest about, are they working or not? So that's where we're,
Leslie, and we don't want to waste any time. Terry, you're up next.
Real quick. All I want to say is, going back to what you're saying, Leslie, I would invite the opportunity to possibly do a time study with their group, with the November meeting. And I'm wondering if we can't get some of us together so we could really analyze together. I was having a hard time myself, and I thought if there was a couple people who wanted to do the study, if we could block some time off, but that's something we can discuss. I'm meeting with you Friday, and I think if we just sit back and see, those of us who had joined the board, Cindy and I, our first meeting, it was like 5 or 6 hours long, and I came out saying, I'm not sure if anything helped a kid. Yeah. And so I want to go back and I want to do those studies so I have a clear picture in my mind if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So that's all I'm asking you for that assistance.
I saw a hand raised. The job is yours. Yes, no, I'm happy to coordinate with you and anybody that's willing. We could have a, a separate meeting about that would be great.
Okay,
Happy to
thank
have
you.
public as well if they want to come. Yep. Paulette, sorry, Kathy.
No, Leslie, you made it very clear to us in a very simply that the budget is a requirement, one of our major responsibilities, and it is one of our primary jobs. We can't use as an excuse not to use 50% of our time focusing on student outcomes, which is what we committed to, but you did not box us into a situation where we neglect what New York State says we have to do. So I don't really see a conflict that if we had to spend half that board meeting and a lot of that time passing a budget so our children can have the resources to have teachers and get to student outcomes, that is our state mandated law. And it's a separate issue from still focusing 50% of our time on student outcomes.
Yeah. You have 50%. I mean, we're asking you to get to 50% where you're focused on this work. But again, understanding that you're passing the budget and crafting the budget are two separate things. Passing the budget and redirecting the budget are, very separate things. So just, the board's process for analyzing, does this budget serve the things we asked for the superintendent to have it serve? Like that's where we want to get with this. And again, we have, I love y'all. Every one of you wants this work to happen yesterday, and I really appreciate it. It's just going to take a long time, and I just appreciate all of you settling in and being okay and being open and honest with this. And, the public is probably, they may be saying, oh, they're not doing whatever. You guys are doing so much work to try and shift what's, the future for kids in Buffalo, and I just want to acknowledge that. So
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Leslie.
Absolutely.
Any other comments? I don't see any more hands. I think this was Terry's old hand up here. Yeah. So, okay. All right. Thank you for this, Leslie. So it's a document that it looks like it's going to be a living document for those of us who will continue on the board. And I think it's going to be helpful, to keep us focused also on student outcome focused governance. Any other comments, questions for Leslie before she concludes? Sharon, I think you had something.
Did I? I don't remember it. If we talked about it earlier, I can't remember it at this point, but
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think all my questions have been answered.
All right, great. So Leslie, you want to, conclude and so that we can conclude this session and go home?
Yeah, no, I think we're good. I appreciate you all walking through that. We will continue this. It will get a little more interesting once we pass the goals and guardrails, and we can work on other things. But again, I encourage you. The document you saw, the worksheet you have, is the exact same thing that's in the Student Outcomes Focused Governance Manual. Those two things align perfectly. There's, this is very complicated and very simple. So it's a very dense document. Please just touch base with it, read it, put it, laminate it, use it for a placemat, whatever you need. But just keep getting familiar with what those things are that we can stretch ourselves to next. Okay. Thank you.
I wonder if we could, when we print it out, it's so small. Is there a way that we can make this the font bigger?
You are welcome to do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, because it printed out so small. Anybody else have that problem?
I had that problem.
Yeah, so that would be nice to have somebody who has the expertise to enlarge it for us and print it out. So we'll find somebody. We have a lot of experts in Buffalo schools. So
I can help with that. I can help with that. If you send it to me, I'll have it printed out large for everyone.
Oh,
thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, that would be wonderful because we need it laminated along with our other items and documents in this student-focused governance information manual that that Leslie's creating for us. So thank you. Dr. Williams, did you have any last minute comments, thoughts to
No, not really. I just want to say, I think we probably are where we should be. This is different, and so it will be challenging and it will take some time for all of us, me included. I'm wrapping my arms around everything. I was encouraged when I heard you say, we've been progress monitoring our students, every
Yeah.
2 weeks. And, I'm competitive. So when I set a goal, I really, I go all in on trying to reach it. But, I appreciate you saying that this is really the first year and we're flying a plane as we're building it. And so
Absolutely.
we're all learning with all of this. So, you be patient with me, I'm patient with everybody. And eventually I think we will begin to see the outcomes that we want to see.
Absolutely. I'm encouraged as well. And I think all of us are encouraged. Change, some people say change is good. Sometimes people say change is a whole transition, but whatever the change is, the bottom line is to affect change in our students' achievement levels. And that's really what it's about. We can have our own personalities, et cetera, but it's about the kids. So this concludes the Executive Affairs Committee meeting. You all have a wonderful, safe evening, and we'll see you on Friday at our implementation meeting, Leslie. All right, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Be blessed, everyone.